Welcome, everybody, to our 150th birthday celebration. I know we've been celebrating all year, but this is the actual date, November 9th. Before my remarks, I want to start with Jude Kanabi and have the winner of our scavenger hunt presented with their goodies. So, Jude, if you would please come on up, maybe tell a little bit about the scavenger hunt.
So we had decided as we were putting together the 150th celebration, and thanks to everyone involved, that it would be a year-long event. And part of the year-long event to celebrate our birthday was to do a scavenger hunt that was a opportunity for our residents and people even outside of the community to learn a little more about the history of Monee. So someone very near and dear to me who has written scavenger hunts before said, well, I'll step up to that challenge. So thank you to my loving husband, Bill, for putting this together. But the scavenger hunt allowed people to learn about the history of Monee through not only just by questions that you could easily derive at the answer, but the scavenger hunt sent you all through the community. And through the community to look at different things, to discover more about the history, and to discover their community as a whole. So we had several people turn in their completed scavenger hunt paperwork, and we did have one winner. The winner received, who completed 25, got 25 of the 35 questions correct. So we would like to say thank you very much to Jean Cockle for being the winner of our scavenger hunt. The scavenger hunt also sent people to our restaurants and several establishments, so they got to know a little bit more about those establishments through that. And we were lucky enough that through Eat the Bone, they gave us 2 $25 gift certificates, so Jean is also the recipient of those. And then several of our Monee items, including the Monee-opoly board. So we want to say thank you to Jean, and I don't believe that Jean is present today, but we will make sure that she gets everything. And she was very happy that she got an opportunity to do it, and I think she even said at one point, and correct me if I'm wrong, Christy, that there were things that when she started to do it, she learned more about Monee than she ever thought she had known, and she's been a very long time resident. If anybody would like copies of the scavenger hunt itself with the answers, we can make them available to you. We'll print them out, and they can be available here or at Parks and Rec, and we can just give it to you. So not only do you have the questions, but then you have the answers, and you can take an opportunity to go around town and take a look at some of those things also.
So Jean called me, actually I saw her on election day, and she said, they're going to announce the winner, and she said, I can't be there, I have to work, but if I win, will you pick up my prize? So I'm here to pick up her prize for her, because she won. And so it's not a ringer, I didn't give her any answers, but she was really, really excited about it. I know she worked really, really hard on it, and she is a lifelong resident, but she was stumped on a lot of the questions, so she worked very, very hard, but she asked me to thank everyone and say it was a real hard challenge, and she was thrilled with her winning. So I will give those all to her with the thanks to the village for it and her sincere appreciation, and she'd love to do it again. Thank you.
I first of all have to say thank you very much for wearing a period dress. It is lovely, and when you take a look at that, if you really take an examination and look at the mayor's dress, this truly was, if we were 1874, this is how people would have presented themselves at that first village board meeting. So, come on up, Mayor.
What woman would have been? It wouldn't have been a woman speaking.
I know, right? So again, welcome. Thank you, everybody, for being here. Yes, much to Jude's acknowledgement that this would have been what would have been worn. I really doubt it would have been a female up here, though. So thank goodness times have changed. So we celebrate Monee today, our history, our present, and our future. This small farm town voted on November 9th, 1874, to incorporate, and Monee officially became to be. Our village saw growth at that time with the railroad, then in the early 1920s saw decline with the cut. The late 60s brought I-57 and new growth. With Monee's location to I-57, we are now a highly sought-after location for development. Today is a day to celebrate Monee, its residents, its faith community, its businesses, its village employees, and elected officials. You, who are all that make Monee what it is today, and will also help to shape its future. So happy 150th birthday, Monee. All right, Christy, bring on the history.
Here comes the history. Good morning, everybody. Thank you to the mayor, and thank you so very much for upstaging me with that gorgeous dress. We were talking a couple minutes ago, and Therese said that she had bought the dress because we were going to have a gala, and so we just chatted over it, and we said, well, with all the construction, it kind of got delayed, so we decided we should have a gala next year. So we're going to hopefully maybe do that. Couple of housekeeping things. If I talk too fast, or if the slides are going by too fast, just let us know. There'll also be a question and answer at the end, and if you didn't catch things on the slides that you want to know about, you can ask. And if you didn't see something, we can always roll back to it at the end. So, welcome to the final event of our year-long celebrations of the 150th anniversary of the founding of the village of Monee. At the Historical Society, it's been a challenge to offer all of the programs and exhibits about our history that we would have liked to do to the construction. But good news. History never stops. So we will continue to celebrate Monee's history next year, and the year after that, and the following year, and so on and so on and so on. And that's the thing about history. It's not static. It's never finished. Even the past isn't written in stone. In the past 15 years or so, since we started gathering information, we have found out many new things and changed the narrative about this little town. And we are still making new history every single day. We just, this last week, as a matter of fact, found out a history about a woman who was sold into white slavery, and found out tons and tons of information. She's going to feature in our February offerings this coming year, Women's History Month, about the very topical subject right now about human trafficking. And it happened here in the 20s, and who knew? So this is history that's out there to be found, and we're still finding it all the time. One thing that we did learn is that it's vitally important to write it down. Everyone has a story, but if it doesn't get written down, it's lost, and that is a shame. Actually, it's more than a shame. It's a tragedy. It's a terrible waste, and we are all the poorer for that. So the story that I am about to tell is not complete, because everything inevitably does not get written down. But hopefully, you will find it interesting and learn some new things. I hope it will make you excited about the town you live in, and it will make you want to learn more. We'll start with Princess Monee, or Marie. She wasn't a real princess. She actually never lived in our village. She never visited the reservation in Raccoon Grove, but we can be proud that our village was named after this remarkable woman. Marie Lefebvre was born in 1783 in a small fur trading settlement called Frenchtown near Detroit, Michigan. Her father was a trapper named Lefebvre of Gascon, and her mother was a Native American of the Odawa, whose family lived in Waganakasiki, near what is now Petoskey, Michigan. Part Odawa and part French, this highly respected and traditionally skilled woman lived through rapidly changing times. Marie married Joseph Bailey around 1810 and settled on Mackinac Island. Bailey was an experienced French-Canadian fur trader. During the War of 1812, Fort Mackinac was captured by the British and Joseph Bailey was taken prisoner. Following his release in 1814, he became an American citizen, which allowed the family to again enter the fur trade, and in the summer of 1822, Joseph and Marie settled along the banks of the Little Calumet River in what is now Indiana Dunes National Park. Their homestead became an important stopping point on the trail from Detroit to Fort Dearborn, which became Chicago, for new European arrivals, and the Potawatomi stopped there on their annual migrations to their winter hunting grounds in eastern Will County, our area, and the Kankakee River Valley. In 1833, the Treaty of Chicago was signed, which forced the Potawatomi to leave their ancestral homeland for Kansas. One of the exceptions awarded in that treaty was 1,280 acres in Will County, Illinois, that Joseph Bailey, because he had some power, has negotiated for his wife Marie and their 5 daughters. The center of this 1,280-acre reservation was located at what is now the intersection of Egyptian Trail and Pauling Road. The Illinois Central Railroad named the nearby train stop Monee after Marie in the early 1850s. Marie, the name became Monee because there is no R sound in the Algonquin language, making Marie Bailey the accepted namesake for Monee, Illinois. And that's how we got to be Monee. And it's kind of cool because if you look in Google, there's almost, if you Google your own name, you'll find several of them. You Google almost any town name and you'll find them. But if you go Google Monee, you will find us. And that's about it. On December 21st, 1835, Joseph Bailey died, and in 1851, Marie sold the Raccoon Grove property to William Butler Ogden. He was a personal friend of Joseph's and the first mayor of Chicago, and she sold it for about $5 an acre. He immediately subdivided the land and resold it. He was a major land speculator and sold land all up and down the Illinois Central. Marie continued to live at the homestead in Indiana until 1866 without ever visiting the town that bears her name. The Bailey homestead is now part of the National Park and is being restored to the period when Marie and Joseph lived there and were an important part of the history of western expansion. After many years of living in the shadows of myth and legend, we are proud to bring forward the true history of an amazing woman. As Monee celebrates the 150th anniversary of our incorporation as a village, we not only honor our namesake, Marie Lefebvre Bailey, but all the thousands of indigenous people who came before us. The statue that will be erected this coming spring will represent and pay tribute to all those Native Americans who lived and died here and called this land their home. Open tall grass prairie stretched across our area for millennia and now exists only in small pockets. And we're lucky to have just recently found that we have one of those small pockets of original prairie land along the Illinois Central Railroad. And the village is working with some of nature groups to develop that, so we'll have that natural prairie. But when the first Europeans began arriving, the Potawatomi and other indigenous people were living in and around Raccoon Grove and had been for over 10,000 years since the last glaciers receded. Evidence of their long habitation was found every spring when the newly arriving farmers tilled the fields to plant their corn, soybeans, and other crops, and found relics of their passing. Every early farmer boasted a collection of treasured arrowheads, projectile points, stone tools, axe heads, stored somewhere in an old cigar box or coffee can. In the early years of our recorded history, there are stories of small nomadic families of Potawatomi that visited the farms around Monee every fall and stayed a week or two on their ancestral migrations through the area. Most European settlement began in the 1820s and 30s, with the earliest arrivals coming from England and Ireland by way of the eastern United States. By the 1850s, German immigrants were the predominant cultural and religious forces in the area. The German farmers were drawn to this area by the fertile land, and because they could employ the tiled drainage system of farming they had practiced in the low-lying fields of their homeland along the North Sea. And that's why there was some really prime farmland still to be had this close in, is because it was real low-lying and kind of swampy. We were just on the western edge of the great Kankakee Swamp that was the northern part of Indiana. And so because they knew how to bury these tiles, they could drain the land and use it for farming. In September of 1850, Congress granted about 2 million acres of public land to the state of Illinois for construction of a railroad from Chicago to Mobile, Alabama. In 1850, there were fewer than 100 miles of railroad in Illinois, isolating the state from the rest of the country. So the need for the railroad was great. In 1849, Augustus Herbert, a veteran of the Mexican-American War, was awarded a land grant by the U.S. government of 160 acres in recognition of his service. He came to Monee. He chose to get that land in Monee Township. In 1850, he built his home on one parcel of this property. The railroad did not run right through his property, but it ran so close that his land became available to be part of the town site. He sold 40 acres to the railroad and had another portion laid out into blocks, streets, and alleys. Herbert had the original plat of the village recorded in the courthouse in Joliet in 1853, and basically Monee was born. In the 1850 census, Monee, originally called Monee Station, had a population of 145 people, and that made it the largest town between Chicago and Urbana on the Illinois Central line. So in those days, Monee was a big deal. It was almost the same size as Chicago, because Chicago came really late to the party. With the completion of the Illinois Central Railroad through Monee and the addition of a train depot in 1853, the population of Monee began to increase rapidly. During the 1850s, Monee became a boom town and the most populous community in eastern Will County, erecting a general store, post office, schoolhouse, and hotel. There was a physician and a justice of the peace. Monee Station became the nucleus to which farmers brought their grain. Dairy farming and oats, corn and hay were the major crops, and the proximity of the railroad made it possible to transport these raw goods to Chicago. Monee began to adapt in response to the needs of the farmers, and grain elevators, a grist mill, livery stable, blacksmith, and many new houses went up. Farming was the predominant occupation of the area. Dairy farming, the oats, corn, and hay were the major crops. The proximity of the railroad made it possible to transport these raw goods to Chicago, and Monee began to adapt a response to the needs of the farmers. Grain elevators, a grist mill, a livery stable, blacksmith, even a factory for producing layman's combined agricultural machines were built. And during this period, we were really hopping. This is the 1850s and the 1860s. The problem, of course, with that is that's where we want to concentrate, because there was no newspapers here. And so we don't have a lot of written records of that time. We do know that an entire Civil War regiment was mustered from Monee. We have records of that, but we don't have the actual physical data. So that's where we have to start digging in some of the reports from Joliet newspapers, but we're still a little sketchy on the history of that period. But it was very, very busy. Between 1870 and 1873, the building we know today as the Monee Creamery, which is the Heritage Center, was erected by Mr. Fackler, Mr. Stenger, and Mr. Dirks, and that was my great-great-grandfather, who produced butter and cheese using the milk from up to 25 farms to make 200 pounds of butter and cheese daily, selling for 21 cents a pound. And they were in operation until 1897. By 1874, Monee had grown to a size where it made sense to incorporate as a village. A village board of trustees and a police magistrate were elected. A municipal building was erected, and by 1879, a water system and a pump house were built. In the mid to late 1890s, many new dwellings were erected from lumber salvaged from hotels built for the Columbian Exposition in Chicago in 1893. The first telephone communication was in 1894, and a full system was installed in the village in 1899. By 1902, there were 21 phones registered in Monee. By 1902, Monee was a thriving village. Cement sidewalks were replaced with the wooden ones, and all barbed wire fencing along them was removed. Barbed wire fencing. And I was reading another story where the pig pens were so close that everything was oozing out onto the sidewalks. So that's why they put in the cement sidewalks, and it was an important thing because I guess your boots couldn't be high enough to walk through the muck. There was a cheese factory. There were four creameries, not just the one next door, but there were 2 or 3 other creameries. There was a doctor, 4 general merchandise stores, a meat market, 4 general merchandise stores, 3 groceries, a meat market, veterinarian, 4 hotels, electric street lamps were installed. While the IC route between Chicago and Centralia was virtually a straight line, it suffered from having some of the stiffest grades on the entire railroad, and it was becoming a major concern. The grade set the tonnage that a locomotive could carry. The continuing growth of rail traffic during the 1900s motivated the Illinois Central to make plans to flatten out the steep grade. Since Monee was the highest point of elevation between Chicago and Carbondale on the IC line, steam engines needed to stop to take on water before climbing the hill into Monee. This waiting time created a bottleneck of trains down the line. Records show that in October of 1921, over 1,000 freight trains came through Monee, as well as 32 passenger trains a day. So 1,000 freight trains a day, 32 passenger trains a day. I mean, I don't know how you'd ever go from one side of town to the other. There had to have been a train like every 5 minutes going through town. So, in January of 1922, the IC officials met with the village board and presented a blueprint proposing the depression of the tracks. And it probably sounded like a really good idea. Grain elevators, warehouses, and the depot would all need to be relocated, and over 1 million cubic yards of earth would need to be excavated at a cost of over $2.5 million. I can't even imagine what that would be in today's money. By March of that year, the village board passed an ordinance providing for the elimination of grade crossings of the streets in the village of Monee across the right-of-way and tracks of the Illinois Central Railroad Company, and for lowering the said roadbed and tracks within the corporate limits of the village. Work on the big cut began in April of 22, with the first trainload of machinery and equipment arriving, and within a few days, the first trainload of earth was moved from Monee to Madison, where the IC tracks were being elevated. In June, a large drag line and 2 steam shovels began excavating, and for over a year, about 300 rail cars of earth a day were shipped off. Local farmers were given temporary employment and brought their teams of horses to help the earth removal process. The last train of dirt was removed in May of 1923, leaving a gash through the heart of the village 25 feet deep and 80 feet wide at the bottom. And so the fate of the village was sealed. Though the IC Railroad through Monee was responsible for the town's early growth, it was also responsible for its stagnation and lack of growth from the 1920s onward. The old depot was demolished in 1923, and permanent bridges were built across the cut at Court, Main, and Mill, and south of town at the location of the Chicago and Southern Interurban Traction Company substation. This was Monee's other railroad line, which operated briefly between Chicago and Kankakee in the early days of the 20th century. This was a small electric railway originating from 63rd Street in Chicago, headed down Halsted, that would later be Route 1, then headed west across open land from Crete to the south end of Monee. They made a sharp turn to the south and followed the IC tracks on the east side, making stops in Monee, Peatone, Indian Oaks, and Kankakee. The company suffered an exploding substation due to a lightning strike in 1921 and went out of service permanently in 1927. After the cut was completed in 1923, trains began to operate on 3 tracks south of Monee and 4 tracks going north. The IC started to recoup their investment immediately with longer trains and more tonnage per train. They could move through town faster, and the steam engines didn't have to stop at the water towers. There were 2, one at the north end of town and one at the south, in order to make it up the hill. Gradually, though, through the rest of the 20th century, rail freight traffic declined, and commuter traffic from Monee halted altogether. I mean, in some of the earlier writings, you hear all these stories. There's all the little personals that, you know, Mrs. Becker went and visited her daughter in Chicago, and somebody else came and visited. We were running back and forth to Chicago all the time because we had a stop in Monee. And so it was very cosmopolitan back in those days. We thought nothing of going into the city to visit people. But once the railroad, there was no more depot in Monee, the trade stopped, the visiting stopped, and we became a lot more isolated. Without the grade crossings, the good thing about it is we didn't have a lot more accidents. We didn't have people getting killed at the grade crossings. The other good thing about us being such a high elevation is I've been told that we are never going to have a tornado in Monee because we're so high. They travel right around us in a circle. So I still go downstairs when the siren goes off. But we're supposed to be pretty safe here anyway. But Monee never quite recovered without the grade crossing. And as automobile use increased and the demand for passenger trains decreased, and the trains stopped coming to Monee at all, this loss of visitors and revenue was a huge blow, and the Monee of old has not yet quite recovered. The second economic blow was the First World War, followed closely by the Great Depression. At the time, Monee was home to 4 banks, all of which folded, causing severe hardship to the town. Like most of the country, businesses were forced to close as spending power decreased. Like many small rural American towns, some people were forced to move to larger urban areas to survive, reducing the population even more in Monee. For the better part of the 20th century, Monee remained a small town of about 500 people. Because of its location, however, Monee was able to survive, perched as it is midway between rural America and suburban Chicago. Even though there were not a lot of jobs or shopping opportunities in Monee itself, folks could drive to Crete or Chicago Heights for groceries, work in Blue Island or Joliet or Kankakee or Harvey, and still live and go to school and church in Monee. Monee still retained a sense of community. So all the time that I was growing up here, you still went to school with your same friends. You could go to church with your same friends. Your dad might work. My dad worked in Blue Island. We went to Chicago Heights to get our groceries or to go to the library. But you still had that same sort of sense of community. After the end of World War II, more people finally were able to return to small towns in greater numbers. With no rail stop or many businesses in town, though Monee was slow to grow. Completed in 1968, Interstate I-57 gave new life to Monee. This major expressway ran through the west side of town directly to Chicago and enabled people to use the artery to commute into Chicago for work. A drop in auto prices in the 1960s and 70s, and gasoline prices as well, also helped ordinary people purchase vehicles so they could take advantage of working for higher wages in the city and a little farther away while still living in safe suburban communities to raise their families. In 1974, Monee celebrated its 100th birthday, and there was a rebirth of community spirit and civic pride. Parades and pageants marked the event, and the history of Monee was documented in Our Roots Are Deep, written by Muriel Milne. The 1980s brought a tremendous growth spurt, with many new housing developments being built in the village. A new elementary school was erected to accommodate the many new residents. A few new businesses sprang up along Monee Manhattan Road, but mostly in support of the traffic on I-57. Beginning in the late 2000s, Monee residents began electing increasingly progressive and village administrations with a desire to bring the village into the modern century. These administrations, with an emphasis on inclusion and responsible growth, put together a comprehensive plan to attract a broad base of residents with new home construction, restaurants, retail, and supporting industries that will allow Monee to grow into the 21st century, while maintaining and reinstilling the small-town atmosphere and community pride that were the hallmarks of our early years. God willing, and the creek don't rise. Thank you all for listening. As you may be able to tell, I love my hometown and could go on for hours and hours. And if you visit the Heritage Center next door, I will be happy to do so for as long as you would like to listen. We at the Historical Society have a mission to find the stories and to capture them. We all love a good story. We watch TV because of the story. Documentaries, sitcoms, dramas, reality TV, even sports. It's all about the story. We watch it for the story. Some of the stories are already written down, and we just have to dig through the archives to find them. Like the one I was telling you about, the lady in the white slavery. Like, we just made the connection. You know, everybody always wants to know, what's the story with that building on Main Street next to the post office? The big brick one that has a sign out there that says something about a funeral home. Some people know it as Rambo's Funeral Home. I just made the connection in the archives. It was built, it looked different. It was built by somebody named Schiffer. And there was a man named Carl Schurz that lived in the 1850s, and he was a huge deal. He was a German immigrant. He was a Civil War general and an ambassador to Spain during the Hayes administration. He was a confidant of Lincoln. His sister lived there. His parents lived there. He visited Monee all the time. And I'm looking at, and it's the same building. That's a huge thing. We want to celebrate that. We're just now making those connections. It's about the story, but you have to make the connections. So, like I said, you have to dig through the archives to find the story, and sometimes it's just putting the little bits of information together from different sources, like a big jigsaw puzzle. We need volunteers to help us do that, by the way. Other stories are still out there waiting to be told. So why not tell your story? We want to capture and preserve your story because it's important. And so it's not lost forever. In the future, we want to make sure that everyone has a voice and leaves a mark on the world. Be a part of the narrative. Make sure we are telling the whole story. As you may notice, I gave more detail to some of the early history of Monee than to the later history. Why? Because we have what Muriel Milne wrote in Our Roots Are Deep. It's a great book. It's a great resource. But this book ended in 1974. And Muriel died in 1974 and never wrote another word. Also, she didn't write a lot about the world she lived in, the world during her lifetime. In her mind, that wasn't history, but it is to us. It's hard for me to realize that in 1963, when I was in 4th grade and President Kennedy was shot, or in 1969 when I was a freshman in high school and the first man walked on the moon, that might be history to somebody else because it was just a memory to me. It was just in my life. Help us capture and keep the history of Monee. We can't keep the history. Somebody else is keeping the history of someplace else. But we're the ones that can keep the history of Monee and leave it for the next one and the next one to find after we're gone. Help us capture the history of Monee. And we have a lot of catching up to do. Come visit the Historical Society. Come next door. We're just next door. We have a lot of new photos of Monee on display after we eat our cake and raffle our quill and buy our stuff and look at it. come on right next door and see what we got. Thank you so much. Oh, questions? Anybody want to see something again? Any questions about the slides?
Can you put, John, can you find the statue of
Yep. So the statue's coming along. The fun thing about the statue is there's really no contemporary picture of what Marie Bailey looked like. There are 2 sketches that were done, but they weren't done in her lifetime, and so they're sort of like idealized sketches of what somebody thinks she might have looked like. The best sketch that we have found is one that was just done by Megan Van Gorder. She's a professor at Governor State that we have been working with. We've been lucky enough to form some partnerships at Governor State. Also, believe it or not, at Oklahoma State. He picked up one of our oral histories that we have done and thought it was marvelous and came out and worked with us for a week on a project that he's working on about, it's a computer thing to find things in oral histories. It's a little bit beyond what I can speak to, but it's a fun, fantastic thing he's doing. And that's the most recent incarnation of the statue. And so the costuming is correct, the dress is correct for the Native Americans of that period. What we're trying to do is capture Marie, but also the indigenous Potawatomi who lived in our area of the time. So it's sort of a stylized idea of what a Native American woman of that period and this area would have been like. The picture of Marie, the older one that looks like a photograph, this one is an AI, an artificial intelligence generated picture, because she found a photograph of Marie's granddaughter. And so with using that photograph plus reports of what clothing they wore, there are very, very detailed records, because these people were very important people. They knew very important people, and there was records of some clothing that they had worn at a wedding up on Mackinac Island. So by taking all of that information, they were able to come up with this image, and I think this one is probably very, very close to what she would have looked like. Does that answer the question, Connie? Any other questions? A lot of the pictures of old Monee, some of them are ones that have been around for quite a while, and you may have seen them. Others we're just uncovering. You know, the internet is a wild and beautiful thing. I mean, Rachel just found a couple of images yesterday that we have not seen before. So it's still out. There's a lot of things out there still to find, and people still have them in their attics and their basements. And sometimes grandma dies, and you find these things. So never pitch anything. Call us. We'll come pick it up, whatever it is, and go through it, because there are still gems out there to find. So, any other questions anybody might have? Okay, thank you.
So before Christy continues with the quilt raffle winner, I just wanted to let everybody know, we've got a display case over against the wall that's got items that were contained in the time capsule that was buried in 1974, so that was from the centennial. And then we have items up here and the capsule for what we're going to be putting in this year. So definitely after the raffle winner is announced, feel free to look around, take a look what was in there, what's going in there, and it's definitely available for perusal. So help yourselves. Christy, if you want to do the quote raffle? Barb?
I'm just gonna put down the pictures. I'm just gonna put the album on and get like.
I also was remiss, I didn't introduce myself. I'm Christy Holston with the Historical Society. This is Rachel White. She can take credit for the PowerPoint presentation. And Barb Sim with the Historical Society. She's the administrator, and when you go over there, you will find her there all the time. So the quilt was Barb's, was my idea, but Barb's work in putting it all together and coming up with the design. And then all the names all around it are the people that put it together. This is the commemorative quilt that will hang either here or over at the Historical Society forever. And we also put together 2 other quilts that are of the same theme, and those are the ones that we are raffling off now.
Do you want us to talk about the design of the quilt?
I will let you.
So just a quick explanation on the design of the quilt, because as the history story, quick explanation on the design of the quilt. Christy went through the history of Monee. The big factor in Monee was the railroad. So the square, the 12-inch square, is a railroad square. If you look at it, you can imagine it are railroad tracks. Yeah. So all 3 quilts that were done have that same square, but they're done in different colors, and they're turned in different directions. We left the commemorative quilt in the traditional railroad pattern. You'll see around there, around the center portion of it, we put the panel for the 150th celebration, along with the Monee Historical Society emblem. That you'll see a stylized feather for the top stitching of the quilt, and that's a nod to the Native Americans that were here first, and also to Marie Bailey. Other little bits and pieces of the quilt you'll see designed and created by the members of. Each of the members took these pieces and the additional quilts and put them together. So it's not, I think I did 1 square. So thanks to the ladies, unfortunately it was all ladies, or fortunately, that did the work, because it was very time consuming and it's beautiful. So.
Okay, which one am I picking for?
So we have, in addition to the quilts, the 2 quilts, we have 3 hand crocheted and, 2 hand crocheted and 1 hand knitted blankets at the Historical Society that were donated by our members. And so we are going to have a total of 5 items. So I also have extra tickets if anybody didn't get in on it. You want some? So if we can maybe do 5 minutes and then we'll pull it, is that okay, Mayor? Okay, if anybody wants additional tickets, let me know. They're $5 each, 4 for $18.74, and I actually have a credit card swipe if anybody's like, I don't have that in my pockets, so let me know. Okay, the first ticket is for the green quilt. Rachel Bach?
Rachel
Two?
Beckman. Rachel Beckman.
Congratulations!
And what's this one for?
This one is the blue quilt.
Do I have just one?
You have just one.
Which one is that?
Michelle Howell Johnson? All right. The next one, it's one of the crocheted Afghans. It's a red and green Afghan. Judy Sabatino.
Did you say you wanted to buy a ticket? No?
What's the next one?
The multicolored Afghan.
Oh, this one's a multicolored Afghan. It's really pretty too. It's knitted.
Very soft.
Yeah. Kathy Pishak. And the last is kind of a rust-colored Afghan. It's really pretty too. It is very, very soft. No, it's me. Go ahead. Jill Donati.
Can we get a picture?
You won the blue quilt.
All of the quilts and blankets are at the creamery. I left them there, so you have to come to get your quilts. Okay?
And I need the mayor to come up.
Congratulations!
If I could please have Phyllis and the rest of the Historical Society come on up, please. Good.
You're good, we got it. 150 cupcakes. You didn't know, did you?
Can I be in the back?
Jim?
Cover my.
Dewey? Lisa? You're a member. Ron. Ron's coming. Kathy? Kathy? Kathy?
You're part of this. Huh? Well, we're going to talk a little bit really quick. We will. We will.
Bob?
Is this on? It is. Okay. Are you ready? All right. Bob, get up here. So before we take the photo, I'm Billy Morgan, the Vice President of the Monee Historical Society, and we just wanted to commemorate that this is really a sea change in the Monee Historical Society. In 2011 or so, the creamery that you're about to go to was about to be demolished, and a group of people came together and just decided we can't lose more history in this town. And so the Save the Creamery Foundation was created, I believe, in 2011, and that morphed into not just saving the creamery, but also preserving our history more broadly. So from saving a building turned into all the work that you saw today about learning about the cut, learning the railroad history, about Princess Monee. And that was all due to the work of a really small group of dedicated individuals, and mostly Christy Holston. And you've seen Christy up here. And you might not know, she said she's with the Monee Historical Society. October 1st was actually her last day as the president of the Monee Historical Society. And so this is a new time for all of us at the Historical Society, because she has been the driver of everything that we've done for more than a decade. So we have a little bit of a point of personal privilege here to thank you, Christy, for a decade on your retirement after 12 years of dedicated service to the community, a founding member and president of the Monee Historical Society, Christy Holston. And our interim president is Phyllis Huffman, and she'd like to say a few words about membership. Or we'd like her to, we told her she had to.
Thanks, Billy. Certainly, we can use everybody's help. As Christy said, you may have something in your attic or whatever that would be helpful to the Historical Society. If you find some of those gems, please bring them in. But what we also need is people to help with volunteering, with doing different work at the Historical Society, and just for supporting us. The village has been a great support for the Historical Society. And if you come over to the Heritage Center, we have membership forms, and we'd be glad to have you sign up and be a member. Thank you. We wanted to give Christy something a little bit special besides a plaque, which is nice, but something that's maybe a little more useful. So Christy, we have a vase to give to you.
Thank you. It's George.
It's George, yes.
It's an original George Mackhart, if you don't know, is a local glass maker who does fabulous work. And buy local.
And we have some of those things in our gift shop at the Historical Society.
Thank you.
Thank you, Christy.
Thank you. Thank you very much. It's a joy, and I'm not going anywhere. They can't get rid of me. I'm just going to try to spend more of my time digging in the archives as opposed to, planning the stuff. Barbara's doing a great job of that, and everybody else is doing a great job of those kind of things. So I just want to, I want to tell the story. So come and tell me your stories. I'll do that part. But I don't want to do the admin part of it. So thank you very much. And thank you all for listening. Thank you. Guys, stop now. Stop. Let me put it on the thing, because I'm not very trusted. There you go.
Yeah, real fast. Promise. Go first. You go it. You can go first. No, I got it. We're taking turns. All right. All right. Check one, 2, 3. Oh, that's beautiful. And then big group shot. Yep. Everyone together. There we go. Somebody's like between us. That works. There you go. Go ahead. Do one more.
Scott, you remember.
Yeah, Lee, you're a member too.
Lee?
You remember?
You want to take this? Come on. Lisa, no.
You didn't shave today.
Jim, you remember too? Sorry, John. I'm all there for you. John.
Get over there.
Where's the mayor? Teresa. You remember?
Waiting for you.
All right, we'll do a couple of them, okay? Phones first.
We got so
I
much
got it, I
shine.
got it.
Come on. Lee?
Come on, Lee.
Lee, you remember?
Come on. All right. 3. All right, can you see everybody? All right, 3, 2, 1, cheese. Okay, then we'll do one with the camera. What?
Roy is a member. Roy.
Everybody else? All right. All right, 3, 2, 1. Oh, no one blinked. All right.
Karen, have one?
Good job.
Karen, did you?
Could David move in closer to you, since he was the founding president?
I dropped